Hi everybody, and welcome to our module on ethanol metabolism. If you go out on the night after your step 1 exam and you consume alcoholic beverages, those alcoholic beverages will contain ethanol, and this is the structure of ethanol on the screen here. And ethanol is metabolized in the human body by the liver through a two-step process. The first step of ethanol metabolism involves an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase, and this enzyme converts ethanol into a molecule called acetaldehyde. This is the structure of acetaldehyde on the screen here. This first step occurs in the cytosol of cells in the liver. The second step occurs in the mitochondria. This involves an enzyme called aldehyde dehydrogenase, and it converts acetaldehyde into acetate, and I've shown the structure of acetate on the screen here. In this module, we are going to talk about the negative biochemical consequences of consumption of too much ethanol. And as we will see, most of those consequences result because both steps in this process produce NADH. The excess production of NADH by metabolizing excess ethanol is what leads to all the downsides in terms of biochemistry of ethanol metabolism, and we'll see all that in this module today. So excessive consumption of alcohol leads to many health problems. The first health problem develops because ethanol is a CNS depressant. We won't talk about this much today, but most of you may know that people who drink too much alcohol can ultimately enter a coma state and even die, and that's because of the CNS depressive effects of ethanol. These other items I've listed on the screen are the biochemical consequences of too much ethanol consumption. If you drink too much alcohol, you can develop hypoglycemia. You can form too many ketone bodies and develop ketosis. You can develop a lactic acidosis. Fatty acids can accumulate in the liver. You can develop hyperuricemia, which can lead to gout, and you can also develop hepatitis and cirrhosis. And as we will see, all of these items are biochemical consequences that result as a result of too much NADH, because like I showed you on the last slide, there is lots of NADH produced when you metabolize ethanol in the liver. To understand many of the negative consequences of excessive ethanol consumption, you need to understand that the high levels of NADH stall the TCA cycle. I talk about the TCA cycle in detail in another module, but for our purposes here, recall that NADH, when the levels get high, can inhibit the enzyme isocitrate dehydrogenase. They can also inhibit the enzyme alpha-ketoglutarate dehydrogenase. So as a result of inhibition of both of these enzymes, the TCA cycle slows down. Another way that NADH stalls the TCA cycle is by shunting oxaloacetate to malate. On the screen here, I've shown the first step in the TCA cycle where molecules of acetyl-CoA are combined with molecules of oxaloacetate to form citrate. However, oxaloacetate can also be diverted into malate. This is a reversible step here of the TCA cycle. And when NADH levels are high, it favors the conversion of oxaloacetate into malate. This is essentially driving the TCA cycle backwards, and this further slows down the TCA cycle. And because the TCA cycle is slowed both from inhibition of the enzymes I showed you on the last slide and shunting of oxaloacetate to malate, you get high levels of acetyl-CoA inside of cells. In the liver, this favors the formation of ketones, and this is part of the reason why you become ketotic when you consume too much alcohol. In addition, recall that oxaloacetate is the first step in synthesis of glucose via gluconeogenesis. Oxaloacetate is formed, and then those molecules are diverted into glucose molecules. But because oxaloacetate is being shunted to malate, there is less oxaloacetate available. Therefore, you have less gluconeogenesis, and this is one of the mechanisms by which patients who consume too much alcohol can develop hypoglycemia. So let's talk in a little bit more detail about heavy consumption of ethanol and hypoglycemia. As we just discussed, when you consume lots of alcohol, gluconeogenesis becomes inhibited. This is because oxaloacetate is shunted to malate in the setting of high NADH. This means that glycogen becomes very important because gluconeogenesis is not working. If you want to maintain a normal fasting blood sugar level, you need your glycogen in order to do that. This means the greatest danger of hypoglycemia occurs when you drink alcohol when your glycogen is low. So people who drink lots of alcohol but don't eat food are at great danger of hypoglycemia because their glycogen stores are low. Another classic scenario is a person who goes on a long run and then drinks heavily afterwards. They deplete their glycogen during the long run, and then when they drink, they need the glycogen to maintain their fasting blood sugar levels. As a result, they can develop hypoglycemia and possibly even seizures because they are drinking heavily in a setting where they don't have lots of glycogen in their liver. Another reason alcoholics develop ketosis is because you can derive ketones from acetate. Recall that I told you that ethanol is metabolized into acetaldehyde, and then acetaldehyde is metabolized into acetate. Well, in the liver, acetate can be converted into acetyl-CoA, and as I told you before, the TCA cycle is stalled from high NADH, so the acetyl-CoA cannot enter the TCA cycle as it normally would. This favors the conversion of acetyl-CoA into ketones, and this is another mechanism by which you develop ketosis in alcoholism. So here's a summary slide of some of the ways you develop ketones in alcoholism: glucose and amino acids and fatty acids, and all the usual molecules that can be metabolized into acetyl-CoA cannot be metabolized further via the TCA cycle, so thus they are shunted to ketones. In addition, ethanol is converted to acetate, and that is converted to acetyl-CoA, and that also is converted into ketones. Now let's talk about why alcoholics develop lactic acidosis. A very important biochemical principle for you to understand is that there is a limited supply of NAD+ inside of cells. So when NAD+ gets converted into NADH, the NAD+ must be regenerated in order for normal metabolism to proceed. For example, this step in glycolysis requires NAD+, so if all the NAD+ is tied up in NADH, glycolysis will not be able to proceed normally. Now, as we saw a few slides ago, NAD+ is depleted by ethanol metabolism. It's converted into NADH. Normally, the electron transport chain is very effective at converting NADH back into NAD+ as it generates ATP. However, when excess alcohol is consumed, you can overwhelm the electron transport chain. This means that much of the NAD+ inside of cells will be tied up in NADH. As a consequence of this, pyruvate is going to be shunted to lactate. Normally, pyruvate from glycolysis enters the TCA cycle, but when the NADH levels get high, they inhibit the enzyme pyruvate dehydrogenase. As a result, pyruvate is shunted to lactate, and this regenerates NAD+. So in the setting of high NADH, which as I told you before is the source of most of the biochemical problems in alcoholism, pyruvate is shunted to lactate and a lactic acidosis can develop. Now let's talk about why alcoholics accumulate fatty acids in their livers. The high levels of NADH, which we've been discussing, stall the process of beta oxidation, which is the process by which fatty acids are broken down. I talk about beta oxidation in detail in the module on fatty acids, but for our purposes here, you should just know that beta oxidation generates NADH, just like the TCA cycle. This means it requires NAD+ in order to function, but as we have been discussing, in alcoholics, all the NAD+ is tied up in the form of NADH. This means the process of beta oxidation is going to be inhibited when levels of NADH are high, and therefore there will be less fatty acid breakdown from inhibition of beta oxidation. In addition to less fatty acid breakdown, there is also an increase in fatty acid synthesis in alcoholics, and that is because, once again, the TCA cycle is stalled. On the screen here, I've shown the first step in the TCA cycle where acetyl-CoA is combined with oxaloacetate to form citrate. Normally, citrate would be further metabolized by the TCA cycle, but this cannot occur in alcoholics because the TCA cycle is stalled from high levels of NADH. As a result, citrate will be shuttled into the cytosol, and in the cytosol, it is used to synthesize fatty acids. Shown on the slide here is the rate-limiting step of fatty acid synthesis, where acetyl-CoA is converted into malonyl-CoA by the enzyme acetyl-CoA carboxylase. And I talk about this step in detail in the module on fatty acids. But what I want to show you here is that when citrate levels climb, like I showed you on the last slide, citrate is an activator of acetyl-CoA carboxylase. So this will result in increased synthesis of fatty acids, and there will be more conversion of acetyl-CoA into malonyl-CoA, and the malonyl-CoA can then go on to form fatty acids. In addition, malonyl-CoA is a powerful inhibitor of beta oxidation, so this will result in more inhibition of beta oxidation and more fatty acid synthesis from malonyl-CoA. Another reason that alcoholics accumulate fatty acids in their liver is because malate accumulates. Shown on the screen here is a portion of the TCA cycle, and recall that in the TCA cycle, malate is converted to oxaloacetate. Well, as we discussed a few slides ago, when NADH levels get high, this reversible reaction goes in the backwards direction so that oxaloacetate is converted into malate. This means that malate levels will rise inside of cells, and there is an alternate pathway for metabolism of malate. There is an enzyme called the malic enzyme, which can convert malate into pyruvate, and in doing so, it generates NADPH. And NADPH is necessary for the synthesis of fatty acids, and when the levels of NADPH climb, you get more fatty acid synthesis. To explain this a little bit further, shown on the screen here is the structure of palmitate. Palmitate is synthesized by the enzyme fatty acid synthase. It uses carbons from acetyl-CoA and malonyl-CoA to make the 16-carbon fatty acid palmitate, and fatty acid synthase uses NADPH. So when the levels of NADPH get high, this favors the formation of palmitate by fatty acid synthase, and therefore it favors the formation of fatty acids in general. So here's a summary slide of some of the processes that favor the synthesis of fatty acids in alcoholics. Acetyl-CoA is converted to citrate, but citrate cannot enter the TCA cycle because it is blocked. Therefore, citrate is shunted into the synthesis of fatty acids. In addition, malate cannot go forward in the TCA cycle, and therefore it is metabolized by the malic enzyme, which forms NADPH, and those high levels of NADPH favor the formation of fatty acids. In addition to all those fatty acids in the livers of alcoholics, there is also a lot of glycerol present in liver cells. And recall that when glycerol is combined with fatty acids, you get triglycerides. Normally, glycerol is metabolized into glycerol 3-phosphate, and then glycerol 3-phosphate is further metabolized into dihydroxyacetone phosphate, which can enter glycolysis or gluconeogenesis. However, the conversion of glycerol 3-phosphate requires NAD+, and as we have been discussing, in alcoholics, all the NAD+ is tied up in NADH. This means that this step will not occur, and therefore you will have high levels of glycerol 3-phosphate, and glycerol 3-phosphate can be combined with fatty acids to form triglycerides. So this is why you get high levels of triglycerides in the liver cells of patients who are alcoholics. So the result of all this distorted fatty acid metabolism is the fatty liver that is seen in alcoholism. This is a picture of a biopsy of a patient with fatty liver, and it occurs in alcoholism due to buildup of triglycerides through all the mechanisms we have discussed on the last few slides. Alcoholics also have problems with uric acid. Uric acid and lactate are both excreted by the proximal tubule, and their excretion is related because they both use a similar transporter. What this means is whenever there's more lactate in the plasma, this leads to less excretion of uric acid. The way this works is there's a transporter in the nephron called URAT1, which stands for uric acid transporter 1. And what this transporter does is it pulls uric acid out of the urine in exchange for lactic acid. In other words, it secretes lactic acid into the urine and pulls uric acid out. So whenever there's a very high level of lactic acid in the plasma, as there is among alcoholics, this leads to more excretion by URAT1 of lactic acid and therefore more resorption of uric acid. So the net effect is that the high lactic acid level in alcoholics leads to a high uric acid level, and that's what can cause problems like gout. High uric acid from any cause, including through the URAT1 transporter I just talked about, can lead to a gout attack, which involves acute gouty arthritis. It often presents in the toe, as shown in this picture. I talk about it in more detail in the videos in the musculoskeletal section, but high consumption of alcohol is a well-described trigger for gout by this mechanism. Hepatitis and cirrhosis are two problems that also occur among alcoholics, and once again, you can tie these back to the high levels of NADH. In this case, the high levels of NADH slow the metabolism of ethanol itself. Recall that the second step of metabolism of ethanol is the conversion of acetaldehyde into acetate. This step generates NADH, but it also requires NAD+ in order to proceed. So when all the NAD+ is tied up in NADH, you will not be able to convert acetaldehyde into acetate, and as a result, you will get high levels of acetaldehyde. Turns out that the buildup of acetaldehyde is toxic to liver cells. Acutely, this can cause inflammation, and this is one of the mechanisms by which alcoholics can develop acute alcoholic hepatitis from drinking too much. In addition, chronically, this can lead to the formation of scar tissue, which is one of the ways by which alcoholics can develop cirrhosis. There's another biochemical pathway that contributes to the development of hepatitis and cirrhosis, and this one doesn't have anything to do with NADH. This is called the microsomal ethanol oxidizing system, or the MEOS. It's an alternative pathway for the metabolism of ethanol, and normally it metabolizes just a small amount of ethanol, but it becomes important when there's excessive consumption. It's a cytochrome P450 dependent system found in the liver, just like many other cytochrome P450 systems, and it generates acetaldehyde and acetate from ethanol, and in doing so, it consumes NADPH and oxygen. The consumption of oxygen by this pathway has been shown to generate free radicals, which can damage the liver. In addition, the consumption of NADPH can lead to glutathione that cannot be regenerated. If you want to understand this, watch the module on the HMP shunt, where I talk about how glutathione is used by red cells to protect from oxidative damage. So when NADPH becomes depleted in liver cells from the MEOS, these cells lose protection from oxidative stress, and this can also lead to tissue damage that can cause hepatitis and cirrhosis. I'll finish this module by talking about the enzyme alcohol dehydrogenase. This is the enzyme that catalyzes the first step in ethanol metabolism, the conversion of ethanol into acetaldehyde. Alcohol dehydrogenase operates under zero-order kinetics. This means that it has a constant rate at which it converts ethanol into acetaldehyde, and it cannot increase its rate when the level of ethanol gets high. This is why it takes a while for the body to metabolize ethanol, because alcohol dehydrogenase operates at a steady rate and can't raise that rate when the level of ethanol gets high. In addition to ethanol, alcohol dehydrogenase metabolizes two poisons, methanol and ethylene glycol. These two poisons can lead to an anion gap metabolic acidosis, which I talk about in detail in some of the renal modules. But for our purposes here, what I want to point out is that alcohol dehydrogenase can be inhibited by a drug called fomepizole, which also goes by the name antizol. This drug is given for the treatment of methanol and ethylene glycol intoxication. The reason you want to inhibit alcohol dehydrogenase in methanol and ethylene glycol intoxication is because it metabolizes these two poisons into toxic structures. So if you inhibit the metabolism of them by alcohol dehydrogenase, you inhibit the development of those toxic metabolites, which are what make people sick. On the screen, I've shown the chemical structure of methanol and ethylene glycol, and you can see that their structures are similar to ethanol. So it should make sense to you that they can also be metabolized by the enzyme alcohol dehydrogenase. In the case of methanol, alcohol dehydrogenase converts that structure into formaldehyde, which can go on to form formic acid, which is toxic. Ethylene glycol can be converted to glycoaldehyde by alcohol dehydrogenase, and glycoaldehyde can go on to form oxalate and other structures which are toxic to the body. The enzyme that catalyzes the second step in the metabolism of ethanol is called aldehyde dehydrogenase. This catalyzes the conversion of acetaldehyde into acetate, and there is a drug that inhibits aldehyde dehydrogenase called disulfiram. It also goes by the name antabuse, and this is given to alcoholics in an attempt to limit their abuse of alcohol. If you inhibit aldehyde dehydrogenase and then the patient consumes alcohol, levels of acetaldehyde in the plasma will rise. And it turns out that acetaldehyde can trigger catecholamine release. As a result, patients who consume alcohol when they're on disulfiram develop sweating and flushing and palpitations and nausea and vomiting. The problem with this drug is if alcoholics really want to cheat, they simply skip their dose of disulfiram and then they can go out and drink without symptoms. However, it is a way for patients who think they may not be able to resist the urge to make it less likely that they will consume alcohol, because if they do, they will get very sick. There's a phenomenon some patients experience when they consume alcohol called alcohol flushing. This is when the skin becomes red and flushed when consuming alcoholic beverages, and this is due to the slow metabolism of acetaldehyde. As we discussed on the last slide, when acetaldehyde levels rise, this can lead to redness and flushing of the skin. This phenomenon is more common among Asian populations. People from Japan, China, and Korea are more likely to have a red, flushed face when they drink alcohol. There is an enzyme deficiency that has been linked to alcoholic flushing. The enzyme is aldehyde dehydrogenase 2, or ALDH2. People with an inherited deficiency of this enzyme are more likely to develop alcoholic flushing, and there is some evidence that they may have a slightly increased risk of esophageal or oropharyngeal cancer. And that concludes our module on ethanol metabolism.